Pixar finally did it. They released the first official look at Inside Out 2, and with it, fans finally got to see how Riley was doing as she continued to grow up after the first film. More importantly though, the trailer dropped a bombshell in the form of 4 new emotions that Riley would have to cope with throughout her life. But what the trailer didn't tell you is how these new emotions came to be, and why they're just now appearing in Riley's command center. Don't worry though, I've got you covered. The new emotions are there because Riley's growing up, which means she's getting new hormones. Now that might seem like a really simple answer, but that's because it is. As a person goes from being a tiny human to a full-grown adult, their body goes through changes both physically and chemically. When the trailer showed Riley blowing out the candles on her birthday cake, she had officially turned 13 years old, which is typically when puberty begins, if not a little earlier than that. Meaning that Riley was about to experience even more changes in her life than she experienced in the first movie. When a person begins to go through puberty, their body is flooded with chemicals that they're not typically used to dealing with. These chemicals are called hormones. Now, I'm not going to give you a full science lesson on what hormones are. Instead, I'll just break it down in a way that should hopefully help you understand some of the changes you'll be seeing in Pixar's Inside Out 2. Think of hormones as sort of a chemical messenger that is created by your endocrine system. These chemical messages get passed straight through your bloodstream towards specifically targeted cells in order to change or alter that cell in some way. That might sound super broad, but that's because hormones are, and they can affect countless things in the human body, including the brain and our behavior. But you don't need to know all of those specific details. All you really need to know is that due to Riley growing up and getting older, her body is going to change. And with those changes, her hormones are going to be introducing a whole bunch of new emotions into her command center that we haven't actually seen in the Inside Out universe. But did you catch that the trailer actually revealed all of this and most likely even introduced fans to Riley's hormones when it introduced that big red button? Although Pixar hasn't confirmed this detail yet, it seems very likely that the big red button that was shown flashing in the trailer before the demo crew appeared was likely an indicator that Riley had entered puberty. My main reason behind this thought process is simply because the button began to flash right before the blue blob showed up and started making a mess of things in the command center. Here's the kicker though. There's a good chance that those blue blobs were actually Riley's hormones. Think about it. In the trailer, everything seems calm and peaceful until, out of nowhere, an alarm starts to ring out. Then, it seems like the emotions that were already in Riley's command center, meaning joy, anger, fear, disgust, and sadness, all simultaneously notice the button for the first time. They all huddle around the button, examining it, or at least that's what it looked like when the red button finally lit up and the trailer showed all of Riley's emotions jumping away from it. As soon as the button was triggered, the command center started getting bombarded with wrecking balls, followed by a group of blue blobs in hard hats. It only makes sense for those blobs to be the hormones, considering the fact that they seem to destroy the command center before altering the console and leaving as quickly as they appeared. In other words, they came in, changed everything, and then just disappeared without so much as a "how you doing?" Now, if that doesn't describe teenage hormones in a nutshell, I don't know what does. Interestingly enough though, the blue blobby hormones weren't there to just act as a wrecking crew. They were actually there to make sure the command center was ready for the 4 new emotions that were eventually going to make an appearance in Riley's psyche. Now, I know what you're thinking. 4 new emotions? Wasn't there only 1 in the trailer? And yes, there may have only been 1 new emotion revealed in the trailer, but Pixar has confirmed that there are actually 4 new emotions that will be interacting with Riley's command center, all of which can actually be seen on this poster. In the poster, you can see Riley's current emotions standing on top of a small platform that's actually being lifted up by 4 other entities. These happen to be the other 4 emotions that will help form Riley into the person she's supposed to be when she grows up. They're actually hinted at in the trailer too. When anxiety first appears, you'll notice, just like Disgust did, that they mention a "we." When introducing himself, Anxiety apologized and then said, "We wanted to make such a good first impression," to which Disgust replied, "Who's we?" While there were a few fan theories floating around concerning the idea that this was a reference to the idea that Riley is going to be a member of the LGBTQ+ community, it seems more likely to be anxiety's way of introducing the other emotions. That being said, who really knows? Only Pixar, but still, this would be a great way for the film to introduce the rest of the emotions by having anxiety itself anxiously mess up their big reveal. While they weren't named in the trailer yet, the 3 other emotions accompanying anxiety in Riley's command center are equally as important to her development. According to their positioning in the poster, all the way on the right, you have an emotion known as ennui. Ennui is an interesting one, and it actually is the French word for the feeling of dissatisfaction or even wariness. From what I can tell by looking at the poster, ennui is going to be a dark blue, almost purple-toned emotion, and its character is likely going to represent how Riley feels as she becomes a teenager and most of her childhood passions and memories begin to fade. In a way, it's much more specific, complicated feeling of an emotion that Riley already has, which is sadness. Next up, sitting directly to the left of anxiety in the poster, you can get your first glimpse at the emotion that's meant to represent embarrassment. Embarrassment is an interesting feeling or emotion because it's one that a lot of children hopefully don't have the awareness to recognize. However, as children become teenagers, they develop a fear of being judged by others while simultaneously feeling the need to create an image for themselves. This means that in Inside Out 2, embarrassment will likely be there specifically to remind Riley of all of her insecurities, or possibly even cause Riley to develop them. After embarrassment, you have the emotion that's all the way to the left at the bottom of the poster, envy. Envy is depicted as an emotion with stars in her eyes. This shows that envy has a way of looking at the world with wonder. However, it's an emotion that's known for taking things a little too far. Envy is likely going to represent Riley's competitive side, or possibly even play off of embarrassment by triggering jealousy in Riley over classmates and friends who she might perceive as being better than her in some way. At the end of the day, envy is a precursor to greed that everyone feels at some point in their life, and it can be a very tough emotion to overcome. With that being said, considering they're actually shown in the trailer, I don't know if any of these emotions will affect Riley as much as anxiety will. I mean, anxiety's arrival alone might be a great indicator of how hard she's going to make things for Riley. The emotion appears immediately after the blue blobby hormones finish tearing up the command center. This violent entrance might have been Pixar's way of suggesting that anxiety is going to do that same level of damage to Riley's life in the real world. And that makes a lot of sense, considering everything we know about anxiety in general. It's not an emotion that mixes well with others, and it's not one that can be bottled up or suppressed like anger. When a teen is dealing with anxiety, which is more common than people may think, it's usually extremely overwhelming for them, or at least it can be. Anxiety often dictates someone's behavior, especially on a social level, which is probably the exact role that she's going to be playing for Riley. That being said, if Riley were to learn to conquer her anxiety rather than letting it dictate her life, it could potentially turn her into a stronger person as she continues to grow. There's also no telling how anxiety is going to mix with her current emotions like joy or fear. It's certainly going to make for an interesting sequel. Another interesting thing to note about anxiety's appearance, as well as the appearance of the other 3 emotions, is that none of those emotions seemed present in her parents' command centers when they were shown in the first film. This could imply that envy, embarrassment, ennui, and anxiety might not be sticking around, or at least they aren't normally in headquarters. In other words, these are background emotions that only come to the forefront of the operation during times of extreme emotional changes, stressors, or traumas. In Riley's case, they're likely appearing for the first time because she had just turned 13 and is in the midst of puberty. This could mean that after that awkward phase in her life ceases to be, most, if not all, of those emotions should return to the background. At least for the most part. That's just a theory though, and there's no way of knowing for certain how permanent these new emotions are until Inside Out 2 finally releases in theaters on June 14th, 2024. I'm curious to know though, what do you think the role of Riley's new emotions will be in her life, and how much will specifically anxiety affect her throughout the movie? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below.